Hello everyone, it's Donna here from Neurodiverse, and it's great to have your company for what is going to be another really informative conversation. We love doing our Let's Talks because we are so lucky to have fantastic guests, and today is no exception. We've got a very eminent Dr. Laura William, and I'm going to give Laura an introduction in a moment, and then we'll get chatting because we've got so much to cover in this conversation. It's all about discrimination connected to the neurodivergent and disabled community, something that a lot of us are talking a lot about these days. But as I said, my name's Donna Stevenson. I am head of training here at Neurodiverse, and I'm always your host for these Let's Talk sessions. I've got shoulder length brown hair, and as always, I've got a Neurodiverse t-shirt on today. It's my lovely grey one. And yeah, it's a really exciting time to talk with Dr. Laura Williams. So let me introduce her and we'll get chatting. So, Dr. Laura is the Associate Professor of Employment and Relations and Equality at the University of Greenwich. She is Director of Diversity Interest Group, co-director of the Centre for Research and Employment Work. And to add to her accolades, everyone, she is also an author. And she has a new book coming out called Claiming Disability Discrimination, Assessing Barriers to Justice. My goodness, Laura, what a resume you have. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really looking forward to talking to you this afternoon. And I shall give a brief audio description of myself. So I have purple short hair and I'm wearing a colourful blouse this afternoon.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dr. Laura. Let's get chatting then. I've got lots of things to get through.
Sounds great.
First of all, then, as I said, your resume is amazing. And obviously, you've written this book as well. And we'll speak a little bit about that a bit later on, if that's okay. But can you set the scene for us in terms of your own journey, your expertise as a professional in the sphere that you're in?
Sure, certainly, it'd be a pleasure. So I became disabled around the age of 14. So it's a community that I strongly identify with and am part of. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my professional life, but I was very much, I was one of those people who loved going to school and I loved studying. So I completed a degree at Cardiff University and then tried to secure a job in the labour market and very much didn't get anywhere. So despite having a first class honours degree from a very good university, I wasn't able to even get an interview. And this, I felt, was largely down to the disability that I had and the reasonable adjustments that I would have needed to enable me to work. So I decided I wasn't going to give up and I would instead apply for a scholarship. So I secured a scholarship from the Economic and Social Science Research Council, who very kindly funded my master's and my PhD studies. And what I wanted to do in that was see how other disabled graduates fared in the labour market, because a lot of the information and the narrative around disabled people is that disabled people are low skilled. Whereas I knew from experience that wasn't the case. And I knew there was this group of disabled people who were extremely highly skilled and they just weren't being used in the labour market. So it was a personal drive to get into this field, but also one of a vast intellectual interest. So I did my PhD on the barriers that disabled people who are graduates face in the labour market, and then applied for lectureships because I enjoyed the academic world and I felt education was almost like a safe place where my impairment and disability could be accommodated. So then I progressed through the ranks up to associate professor, and now very much my specialty is how law is implemented in the workplace, or very often, unfortunately, isn't implemented in the workplace. So what barriers do disabled people face in the workplace, and then also in how they seek to enforce their rights. So in terms of access to justice, so through trade unions, but also through the employment tribunal. So very much focusing on access to justice for disabled people within the labour market, how their rights are enforced, and then what are the patterns of discrimination that they're experiencing whilst accessing and inside the labour market.
Wow, it's so inspirational to hear you talk like that. you've got that lived experience as well, which we talk so passionately about now, don't we, Laura, in terms of you are of the community that you also work to and serve and so on and support. So amazing, amazing. As I say, we're so lucky to have you with us. We know you're an incredibly busy person. So on the back of that, then, you've already started to talk about some of the things that I know we want to get into as we chat. Can you give us an overview then, Laura, of where we're at currently in the UK? So this is a UK specific conversation. We know our friends on LinkedIn are international, but we're going to focus on UK here. Where are we at in terms of disability, employment law, and so on? Where are we at currently in the UK? We hear lots of things in media, including this idea that tribunals connected with neurodivergent community, for example, are on the rise. So could you give us a real nice overview of where you think we're at currently with our legislation and so on?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So when the Labour government came in, they made a lot of promises around revising equality legislation. And the 1st of July this year, we had a roadmap published of where the Labour government was in terms of implementing its changes to the Employment Rights Bill and the new Equality, Race and Disability Bill that is being proposed. So where they are at the moment in terms of the Race and Disability Bill is they are currently sifting through the consultation responses that they have had, and we're looking at around 2026 for some further information on what that exactly is going to look like with an implementation within the next 4 years. Now, what's very exciting in that bill is that it's going to mandate disability pay gap reporting for employers with more than 250 employees. Now, we don't have that provision for disability at the moment. We only have that for gender. And it looks like the ethnicity and the disability pay gap reporting legislation is going to be very much mapped onto what the gender provisions are. But we have to wait a little bit to see exactly what that looks like because they haven't released that. They're also looking to extend equal pay claims. So looking to implement equal pay claims on the basis of ethnicity and disability, akin to the gender equal pay claims that we've had. So there is a lot of going on in terms of disability specifically, but also in terms of Section 14 of the Equality Act 2010.
Laura, we think your internet may be glitchy, so I could hear you. It does happen sometimes. So you were talking about Section 14, I think. I hope we haven't lost you because we're just in the middle of something really important. Hi, everyone. Sadly, and it does happen sometimes, I think we've lost Laura. We knew her internet connection was glitchy as she joined us today. It does happen, doesn't it? This is live. But what we're going to do now is going to try our best to get her back as we go through our conversation. What Laura was talking about was some of the changes that we are about to see with our legislation around our neurodivergent and disabled community. So as we work hard to get Laura back, thank you so much for your patience. As I say, it doesn't happen a lot, but it does now and again, and it shows that we're live, doesn't it? While we wait for our tech team to frantically bring Laura back into the conversation, I know they'll be doing that as I'm talking to you. I think it's really important when we have a conversation like this is to realise the work that we do here at Neurabox to support all our disabled, neurodivergent individuals in the world of work. So as we bring Laura back, and Laura, boy, am I pleased to see you, because I was just trying to share wisdom there while we were waiting for you to talk about the work that we do here at Neurabox. No, listen, it happens. We are live. So this is the authentic process of internet glitching out. But I was just saying to folks, we're going to talk a lot today, and we'll come back to you about that question because we lost you just right in the middle of all as the words of wisdom you were sharing. But I was just talking to our audience about the fact that there's lots of organisations around to support this community.
Mhm.
Neurodiverse being one, we're in a very privileged position to answer questions and to support folks around getting the support they need in the world of work. But we just lost you when you were talking about the new laws coming through. So you'd got us so far, and then I think you were talking about, was it Article 16? That's
Section
ringing any bells?
14, I think it
Section
probably
14.
was. Yeah,
That's right. I'll
that's when
get
we
it
got
right in a
all
minute.
suffering.
Section 14.
Yes, that's it.
Please pick that up and take us through.
Okay, sure, no problem. So sorry about that.
No, please, it's okay.
So Section 14 was in the Equality Act when it was originally drafted, but the government at the time decided not to implement it. So it's in the legislation, but it's not activated. So what the Labour government is looking to do is to activate that provision. And there's been quite a significant amount of consultation around whether Section 14 is adequate in its current form. Because what Section 14 allows you to do is to provide for combination discrimination. So, for example, you might be a Black woman or a disabled woman, and the distinct experience that that brings would allow you to claim a combination discrimination under Section 14. So there's a lot of debate at the moment and consultation around, are the provisions actually adequate as they stand, or do they need to be revised before the government invokes them? So it's an exciting time in terms of legislation. There's a lot going on. You've got the draft disability and ethnicity bill regarding disability pay gap reporting and equal pay claims, and also this Section 14. There's other things going on around sexual harassment and leave arrangements, but in terms of disability, they're the key highlights that we're seeing at the moment.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And I think this helps us to figure out what we're going to have a look at on media to try and follow this journey through, see what happens. It sounds like this government is trying to address maybe anomalies and unfairnesses that's been in our system, maybe inherent for a while, I'm not sure, but really interesting to hear you speak about that. On the back of that then, and this is a very basic question, but I think sometimes the very simple basic questions are the ones that a lot of us still struggle with. Can you share then what actually constitutes discrimination for our community, Laura? Take us right back to basics.
Okay, so the Equality Act 2010 prohibits different types of discrimination. And the first one, which probably is what most people might think of when they think about discrimination, is direct discrimination. So where person A treats person B badly because of their protected characteristic, be that disability, ethnicity, age, gender. So you have examples there where, for example, someone might not be given access to a promotion because they're disabled. You have other provisions around reasonable adjustments. So that would be a disabled person requires, it might be speech to text software, and that's not provided for them. They might need a ramp access, and that's not provided. That's a distinct type of discrimination. And that type of discrimination is the most common. So in the book, which I'll talk about later, we were able to prove that reasonable adjustment cases are the most common type of disability discrimination that we see in the employment tribunal at the moment. But you also have harassment and victimization. Harassment is creating a hostile or an unwanted negative environment for an individual. And victimization is where you are treated negatively by your employer for either bringing an employment tribunal claim or supporting somebody who is, or raising a grievance. And then you also have indirect discrimination. Now, this one is actually a very powerful provision, but in my opinion, quite underused. So this would be discrimination where there's a policy, provision, or practice that disproportionately affects disabled people. So, for example, you might have a policy in an organisation that says you have to start at 9 o'clock and you have to finish at 5 o'clock. Now, that would have a disproportionate effect on a disabled person who maybe can't commute during peak travel time, and they prefer to work 8 till 4 because they need that for their condition. Now, the only way an employer can justify that is if it meets it's a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim, which is the legal language, basically saying it's an essential to the way the business functions. So that's the only type of discrimination that can be defended by the employer, is indirect discrimination. And then you also have discrimination arising from disability, which is a little bit more complicated and is often claimed less because it's less clearly understood. And this would be, for example, where someone has a protracted period of sick leave and is then dismissed, but that they needed the sick leave because of their disability. So there's a variety of protections in the law, and we have seen that disability claims are steady since 2022 in terms of the numbers we're seeing at the Employment Tribunal. And, looking this morning at the latest statistics, there's, looking at my notes here, 876 claims that have been lodged at the Employment Tribunal in 2025 alone. And for a whole year, you're looking at around 1,900 per year since 2022. So it really is a significant number, but they are staying steady. But as you did mention earlier, there is a rise in the claims amongst the neurodivergent community. And I think that is largely being fueled by greater levels of diagnosis and greater levels of awareness of needs and also rights within the workplace. So it's a combination of the different things that's going on that's fueling that rise, in my opinion.
It's really fascinating. And I think to hear you speak about the different categories, I hope what it does is it helps folks who are listening to this, who've come to this session, to find out more about maybe their journey, somebody connected to them. It helps to clarify thoughts about, what their journey may be in that way if sadly they're going through that. For those individuals who might be listening because this is their, happening to them right now or somebody close to them, Laura, where can we go to find out how we get support or help if we feel that, this is us, the things that you've just talked about? Yeah, that's what's happening to me currently. Where can we go to get support in a trusted, reliable way?
So ACAS is a really good source of support, and certainly before you lodge a claim at an employment tribunal, you do need to contact ACAS first to go through early conciliation. But they can provide advice prior to taking a case to an employment tribunal, and they also have a lot of helpful guides on their website that you can download and look through. If you're a member of a trade union, that's also a really important source of advice. Now, I appreciate that's much more common in the public sector than the private sector. But trade unions often have an equality officer and caseworkers who are equipped with legal knowledge who can help you. And in certain cases, although the threshold is set quite high, they can provide representation at an employment tribunal as well. And then also the Equality and Employment Law Centre, who are based up in Liverpool, but do work nationally. They are a fantastic source of support and advice on equality law issues and have a vast range of experience. I've had the pleasure to work with them on some other projects, and I found their experience and knowledge and the support they provide to people very, very invaluable indeed.
Great, thank you for sharing that. It's important for people to know that they're not on their own, and we can share some of those links on Definitely. The back of this conversation. I said in the introduction, I mean, my goodness, you're so eminent, and to listen to you speak, wow, it's so inspirational. You've recently written a book, and I'm going to ask you to speak about it, but the title of which is Claiming Disability Discrimination, Assessing Barriers to Justice. Laura, please talk around what inspired you, what's in there. Also, where can we get the book as well? It sounds brilliant. So over to you. Tell us about the book.
Okay, thank you. Well, I was inspired to do the project that led to the book because I'd finished my PhD. I'd established that there's all this labour market discrimination for disabled graduates and disabled people generally. And then I was like, well, how do they enforce their rights? We know those rights are there, but we know discrimination is still prevalent and increasing. So what's happening? Why aren't these rights being enforced? So I tried to speak to some organisations to try and get some insight to those organisations that help disabled claimants. But it was very difficult to get people to come forward to talk about their experiences because they'd been so traumatised by them. So instead, I decided to take a different approach, and I spent a lot of hours in a very dark archive in Bury St Edmunds, going through all the employment tribunal judgments from 2015 to 2017, because these are such a rich source of data. They provide all the details on the employment tribunal case for disability discrimination or any other claim that might be lodged at the Employment Tribunal. And I was able to go through these. I read over 2,000 of them to understand what a disability discrimination claim looks like. What are these people experiencing? What are they claiming? What's the outcome of their claim? And how does the court manage their case? And I felt this was really important to do because although the Ministry of Justice provides quarterly statistics on the number of cases that go to the Employment Tribunal, these aren't disaggregated. So you're not able to look at them at any fine-grained detail to find out, well, what happens to reasonable adjustment claims? Who claims reasonable adjustment claims? Is it more men or is it more women? What about the sector? What about the industry? That data just does not exist. So by going through this 3-year period of Employment Tribunal claims, myself and my co-authors were able to establish this database, which is the only kind in the world that has enabled us to interrogate the disability discrimination claims to find out what factors affect success and are there barriers or indications of barriers to justice. And a big shout out to Professor Susan Corby and Professor Birgit Paukstad, who did this project with me. It was a long journey. We never thought when we started in 2016 we'd still be talking about it 9 years later, but it's proved to be that important and necessary, I suppose is the best way to put it, in highlighting just what happens to disability discrimination. And we did find 6 key barriers to justice or indications of barriers to justice. And the most important one is just how necessary it is to have legal representation in the Employment Tribunal. So the majority of disabled claimants are unrepresented. They're what we call litigants in person. So they're going through this very stressful legal process on their own. They don't have legal representation in the Employment Tribunal. And if you don't have legal representation, you're less likely to win your claim. But also we were able to work at what we called inequality of arms. So we were able to look at the representation of the claimant compared to the representation of the employer. Now, it's probably no surprise to anyone listening to this that employers are normally very heavily represented with very senior legal counsel. So what we found was the majority of cases had this inequality of arms, where the employer has much more powerful representation than the employee, and that also affected the outcome of the case. It made it much harder for you to win your case if you were engaged in a claim for inequality of arms. And then the other really important barrier to justice was the strict legal tests around disability discrimination. So what makes disability unique compared to some of the other protected characteristics is you first have to prove your disability before you can claim disability discrimination. Now, this is normally determined at a preliminary hearing. Sometimes it's left till later if the issue is a bit more complicated. But you have to prove that you have a long-term health condition that affects your ability to carry out normal day-to-day activities for 12 months or more. And that is quite difficult because employers, we've found evidence that employers are very keen to defend themselves. And one of the first things they will do is they will say, I don't believe this person is disabled. And then the disabled person has to then prove their disability through medical reports. And it's only the Employment Tribunal that can definitively make that decision as to whether the person meets the definition of disability. But in a significant number of cases, claimants weren't meeting that definition of disability for what appeared to be relatively trivial reasons, and then they weren't able to go on and prove their discrimination had happened. So what we call for in the book is a much more stigma-based approach to understanding who is disabled. So you prove that you belong to a disabled community that is stigmatized, which is very easy to prove. You just need to look at the employment gap for those of working age. Disabled people are much less likely to be employed. And then you can prove your discrimination. And that approach is taken in other places, such as the US, that don't look so much at physical limitation when they're determining disability. So they're just like two of the highlights of what's quite a long book and has proved to be very useful. And we're using the evidence in that book to inform a lot of the government consultations that are going on around the new shape of legislation going forward as well.
Yeah, it sounds like such a seminal piece, Laura, and actually long overdue. The work that you and your colleagues have done going through the archives in that way. And with so one eye on the past, one eye on the future, what, you know, the gaps sounds so useful. Like you say, I'm glad people are looking at it, using it in its most productive way and inspirational way, I guess.
Thank you.
May I ask you, and I know we have to be delicate here because of your different roles, there's certain things that it makes it's difficult for you to speak to. So please you guide me through as I ask this question.
Okay.
When you say that when folks get to tribunal, they're having to prove their disability, is this a disconnect? So we often speak of, and let's talk for the neurodivergent community, self-identification is enough to trigger reasonable adjustments and so on. So let's say somebody's gone on that journey, they've not yet had an assessment, maybe they don't want to have an assessment, but they've self-disclosed, employer has, you know, responded in whatever way. Obviously, in the stories that we're looking at, sadly, it's discrimination. Something's gone wrong, and this person now finds themselves in those types of a situation. Can I check then, if that person's not had some sort of an assessment for, we're going to talk about neurodivergent differences here, is the onus then for that person to go forward and have an assessment during that journey? Are you able to answer that? I can answer it. Uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I can answer it to some extent. So every situation would be different.
Okay.
Having a diagnosis can help. A formal, you know, certified diagnosis from an assessment can help, but it's not essential. So even with a formal diagnosis, the only person who is able to determine whether you meet that definition of disability would be the employment tribunal judge. So you'll often see people are referred to occupational health. We saw that a lot in the employment tribunal judgments that we were reading. And one of the questions that occupational health gets asked is, do you think this person is likely to meet the definition of disability? And that's because, again, occupational health can only give guidance around whether they will meet it or not. It can only actually be definitively determined inside the employment tribunal. But I think that's where it really comes back down to the importance of disclosure. Now, I know from personal experience and from the research that I do that disclosing your disability or your impairment is really quite difficult. It's a trust journey. You have to trust the person you're disclosing to. But the importance of proving that you've told your employer that you have a condition that needs a reasonable adjustment, for example, is really essential, because one of the things that we saw in the study is not only do you have to prove that you have a disability or an impairment, you also have to prove that your employer knew about it. So the employer will often first mount the challenge that, okay, we didn't know, this person doesn't meet the definition of disability. And then the second they'll say, oh, but we didn't know they were disabled. So how could we make an adjustment? How could this be direct discrimination? We didn't know they were disabled. So that kind of formal written disclosure where you can go back and say, no, on this date, I disclosed to this person is really essential. And a mistake that is very understandable, but that a lot of people make, is often when you join an organisation, you fill out your equality and diversity monitoring form, which a lot of large organisations have, and you tick that you're disabled on there. And a lot of people understandably think that that then means their manager knows they're disabled and the organisation knows that they're disabled. But what we know is that that form is divorced from your personnel file in the majority of cases. So it doesn't actually inform the organisation that you're disabled at all. It literally is detached from your application and just used to monitor the trends of applications in an organisation. So that doesn't necessarily provide you with the disclosure that you need to secure the adjustments.
Thank you. So disclosure is actually really, really important on this journey, and just picking up some of the information that you're sharing. And if sadly you do find yourself on this journey as a part of the neurodivergent disabled community, make sure you get that legal advice and representation as well. It sounds like from what you said a little bit earlier.
Yeah, the study showed the real importance of legal advice, even if it's at early stages and it's not actually representation at a hearing, which obviously would be better. But the research really shows the importance of legal advice early on and at representation if you can. But it's difficult because legal aid isn't generally available for employment tribunal cases.
Yeah, thank you. And we've got lots in the chat of people sharing, their frustrations about some of the ways that we work. It's definitely a journey that is ongoing around these issues. It's very emotive for everyone, and quite rightly so. Very basic question. Where can we get that book, Laura? Because it sounds brilliant.
Thank
Where
you
can we get our hands on it?
So we was sharing a link at the end, which will go direct to the publishers. You can also get it in Waterstones and Amazon and any good book retailer. It's available online. If you do have some kind of institutional login, such as I think it's Athens or Shibboleth, through like university libraries or maybe the NHS or large public sector organisations, they should have an access to it free as well to the ebook. But it is available in print or ebook.
Lovely. And for those of us who aren't connected, great to hear Amazon, booksellers and so on. It's out there.
It's out there.
And we'll pop a link.
Look out for it. It has a very purple cover, which was my my choice in making it stand out on the bookshelf.
Last question then. I could talk to you for ages. And we've got, as I say, lots of comments of people, sharing their frustrations and sometimes with the systems. We're very lucky in the UK, but maybe, like I say, we've still got a journey ahead. Closing thoughts then, Laura, for folks who are listening to this. This is often the time when we ask our guests to share words of wisdom and so on. So I'll leave it for you to decide what you'd like to share with those who are listening. Bearing in mind that brilliant expertise and wisdom that you've got. So over to you.
Okay, thank you. I think it's really important to remember that you're not on your own, that what you're experiencing is unfortunately a pattern of discrimination that we see across the UK and across globally. And while that doesn't help you sort out your own situation, it reinforces that this isn't the fault of your own. It's not your own fault. And it's the way that society is not geared up to appreciate the contributions that disabled people can make, and it doesn't value disabled people in the way that we should be valued. And it's that community spirit of coming together to fight against these injustices that are really important. Now that can be difficult in the disabled community because we're all very different, and impairments, even the same impairment, affects different people differently. But if we can unite around the shared oppression that we experience, that's when we can start to bring hope for change, and certainly reach out to those support organisations that are out there, and think about staff networks. Create your own disabled staff network, even if you're a relatively smaller organisation, to find other people who you might not know are disabled. Not all disabilities are visible, but finding out who else in your organisation is sharing your identity, and you can work together to foster allies and create some kind of change. It's difficult, but getting that support when you're going through the difficult situations can come from other members of our community and also these support organisations. And these are your rights. Enforce them. And we need to fight to get these rights realised. Rights are not effective unless they're implemented. And we need to think about how we can overcome those implementation gaps. And the responsibility isn't by any means all on us. Organisations do need to change. They do need to implement the law, and there can be improvements to the way that's done. But it's coming together, supporting each other and fighting for what is rightly yours, and don't take the blame on yourself. It's not your fault. It's not any deficiency in you whatsoever.
Such wise words. Thank you, Laura. And I'd just like to echo that. We often say on these conversations about feeling, that sense of community and connection. That's where we get so much strength from, and learning from each other as well. And such a privilege for us here at Neurodiverse to be part of that community. This is why we have these conversations, to meet with people like yourself, to share this information and come together and have these conversations. I'm guessing as well from what you say, Laura, it's about getting educated about yourself, like you say, about your rights and so on, as well as that. And that piece, I think we learn from each other, as well as going and researching and so on and so forth.
Yes, definitely.
Which I think this conversation, I hope, has contributed to, and definitely your work and the brilliant book you've just been talking about all adds to this conversation. It's an ongoing journey for us. So that just leaves me to say a huge thank you to you, Laura. I don't know if you want to say goodbye to everyone as we round up this conversation.
Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure to be able to share my experience with you and to be able to talk to you about these really, really relevant issues. And I hope that you're able to use the information that I've shared in some way that benefits you. And it's just been a pleasure to be here and to share with you. And thank you very much for the invitation.
Well, thank you. It's been our pleasure. Really, really informative and inspirational. And that just leaves me to thank everybody who's listens to our conversations, our supporters here at our Let's Talk sessions. Another really, really important, informative conversation, wasn't it, everybody? We go on, and to take Laura's wise words with us about the connections, the learning from each other, getting educated about what our rights are and so on, making sure we have that connection with the support networks that are out there as well. So until next time, everyone, we're sorry about the glitches, but Laura, we managed to get through it.
We did come back. We did come back strong.
So thank you so much, everyone. Until next time, take care until then. Thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye.